I felt the elevator doors closing behind me when I stepped in sideways, trying not to bump the wall of people packed inside. Even then, my shoulder brushed lightly against Brian Keller's arm. His paper cup jolted, and 2 drops of coffee splattered onto the gray floor. He looked at me the way someone might look at a cracked piece of machinery, annoyed, impatient, already deciding I was at fault. "Of course," he muttered. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. It was crowded. That should have been the end of it. A small accident. Nothing more. But Brian never passed up an opportunity to turn small things into leverage. He reached into his leather folder and pulled out a manila file, the one I had submitted 3 weeks ago. The one I had filled with documented achievements, overtime reports, system improvements, and team metrics. My promotion request. I felt my breath catch. He flipped the file open, uncapped a black pen, and without even glancing at the crowd wedged between us, wrote across the top page in impatient strokes, "You don't have leadership potential." Then he took out a stamp, a bright red stamp, and he pressed it onto the page with a sharp, deliberate thud, "Rejected." A couple of analysts in the corner went still. Someone pretended to look at the ceiling. No one said a word. Brian slid the file back into the folder and spoke calmly, as if reciting a checklist. "Bella, take that as clarity. Nothing personal. Let's not create drama." It was the coldness that stunned me more than the insult. Like he had planned this. Like he had waited for a moment when I could not defend myself. I steadied my voice. "Thank you for the feedback." He nodded, satisfied. "And I'll resign." I added, properly, "Effective today." That made him freeze for half a heartbeat. Not long, but long enough for me to see he had not expected that response. The elevator chimed at the next floor. He walked out without looking back, leaving the faint smell of burnt coffee and a folder that no longer belonged to me. When the doors closed again, I exhaled and finally let the humiliation settle, sharp and quiet in my chest. I had followed their rules for 12 years. Now I would follow them one last time, and nothing would protect them from what came after. I walked straight to my desk after the elevator incident, ignoring the looks that followed me. My hands were steady, almost clinical, as I opened my laptop and drafted my resignation. Formal notice. Final date. Reference to the employee handbook. 0 emotion. 0 hesitation. Janet from HR appeared beside my desk before I even hit send. "Bella, did something happen upstairs?" Brian looked tense. He gave me clarity. I said, "Now I am giving the company mine." Her eyes widened. "You are resigning." I handed her the printed letter, "Effective today," and I will complete every required step. Janet read it once, then twice. "Are you sure I am done guessing what I am worth?" She did not argue. The next 3 hours became an assembly line of closure. I documented every operational workflow I owned, attached every file to the shared server, and updated the disaster response binder I had rewritten myself at least 6 times over the years. I transferred system access, reset passwords, labeled folders, and sent a final summary email copied to HR and senior management. No panic, no tears, no apology for walking away from 12 years of work they never understood. At one point, Ethan from the analytics team hovered by my chair. "Bella, we rely on you for the Solara audits. You cannot just leave. I am not leaving anything undone." I said, "Everything is in the handover packet." That is not what I meant. I met his eyes. "Then you should talk to management." Brian finally emerged from his office as I shut down my computer for the last time. He gave me a thin, almost amused smile. "We will manage without you," he said. "I hope so," I replied. I handed him my badge. He took it like it weighed nothing. I walked out of the building feeling lighter than I had in years, not triumphant, not angry, just free. The door closed behind me, and the hum of the office vanished as if I had never been part of it at all. By 8 in the morning. My phone lit up with a text from a junior analyst named Mark. Bella, where's the Solara procedure file? Can't find it anywhere. I stared at the screen, then placed the phone face down on my kitchen counter. I had documented everything. I had followed every rule. Whatever they could not find now was not my responsibility anymore. At 8:30, my phone rang again. This time it was Sonia from IT. Hey, Bella, quick thing. Do you remember the override credentials for the compliance server? The reset did not go through. I handed every password to HR. I said, I know, but Brian never forwarded them. Can you just... No, I said gently. I am not with the company. She exhaled, defeated. Right. Sorry. It is just chaos here. I did not answer. I hung up before she could apologize again. By 9 o'clock, the messages escalated. Urgent client waiting. Who approves emergency shipments now? System says you are still listed as primary. Someone even tried a video call. I let it ring until it died. I had spent 12 years holding that place together. If the first day without me felt like an earthquake, that was not my crisis to fix. Around mid-morning, a number I recognized but had never spoken to called the direct line of a long-term client, Rylan Pharmaceuticals. I answered out of habit. A stern female voice came on. This is Victoria from Rylan. We were told you are unavailable. That is unacceptable. We need Bella Hartwell. I do not work at Cargenta Dynamics anymore. I said. Silence. Then a disbelieving. They let you go. I resigned. Properly. Well, she said sharply. Their shipment is stalled because no one knows the clearance steps you handled. Find whoever is in charge and tell them Rylan expects accountability today. I almost laughed. That is not my role anymore. Before she could protest, I ended the call. The phone buzzed again instantly, but I let it vibrate across the counter untouched. Cargenta Dynamics wanted to believe they could manage without me. Now they would learn what that actually meant. The first 2 days after I left, the calls came in waves: questions, complaints, half-panicked requests for files they should have known by heart. By the middle of the week, those waves had turned into something heavier. I heard it in the hesitant messages that slipped through. On Wednesday, Ethan called, sounding breathless. Bella, the inventory sync is delayed again. The whole queue is backed up. I documented the fix. I said, check the handover folder. We tried, he muttered. Brian says none of your notes are clear. I knew that was a lie. Then he should read them again. By Thursday, Sonia from IT tried calling twice. When I finally picked up, her voice cracked with frustration. Shipments are misrouting across 3 states. No one understands the auditing rule you built into the carrier integration. I left the instructions. They do not work without the override, she whispered. Brian thought he could bypass it. Now the system just rejects everything. I kept my tone even. I no longer manage those workflows. There was a long pause. Bella, people are scared. On day 6, the message that came through made my stomach tighten, even from a distance. This is Victoria from Rylan Pharmaceuticals again. Your former company has stalled a time-sensitive shipment. If they do not resolve it by tonight, federal regulators will intervene. I said nothing. That silence was all I owed. By the morning of day 7, the cracks finally gave way. At 8:12, Mark sent a single text: system locked, status flashing red. No one can access compliance. Brian says it is your fault. Minutes later, Sonia left me a shaky voicemail. The compliance software requires a master authorization code. Brian insisted he knew it. He was wrong. The system locked the entire operations wing out. We tried everything. Another voicemail followed, this one tighter, angrier. He is blaming you for not writing the code down. Bella. He is telling leadership you set him up. I set the phone down slowly. I had given Cargenta Dynamics every tool they needed, and now the tool they had ignored the most was the one thing they could not replace. My phone began ringing before 8 in the morning. Brian's name flashed first. I watched it vibrate across the table until it stopped. A minute later, it rang again. Then again. By the fourth attempt, he switched tactics. "Bella," his voicemail said, "we need to discuss something urgent. Call me back immediately." I deleted it without listening to the rest. 10 minutes later, HR tried, "Bella, please return our call. There seems to be a misunderstanding regarding the systems you maintained. I let that one die too." By 9 o'clock, the regional vice president's number lit up my screen. A voice message followed. "This situation has escalated. It would be in everyone's best interest if you spoke with us today." I placed the phone face down and continued making coffee. They had made their position clear in that elevator. Now I was making mine clear too. At 9:42, an unfamiliar number emailed me. The subject line read, "Critical Consultation Request Legal Affairs." The message was short, formal, and unmistakably anxious. "We request your immediate assistance regarding a compliance breach affecting multiple clients. Compensation and contract terms negotiable. Written agreement provided upon confirmation. Legal did not reach out unless the house was already burning." I typed a single reply, "I will provide consultation. Contract required in writing. All terms must be agreed upon before any interaction." The response came back in less than 6 minutes. "Understood. Drafting now." While I waited for the contract draft, my phone rang once more, but not from Brian, not HR, not even the regional office. This time, the caller ID read, "Office of the Chief Executive Officer." I answered. A calm female voice spoke quickly. "Ms. Hartwell, this is Lillian, Assistant to Chief Executive Officer Marcus Rowe. We need you in the Seattle headquarters tomorrow morning at 8. Transportation can be arranged. This request is directly from the Chief Executive." I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of that land. Brian had been completely bypassed. So had every manager above him. "Send me the written contract." I said, "Yes, ma'am." She replied. Immediately, I ended the call and let the silence settle around me. Sharp and steady, Cargenta Dynamics was finally willing to pay for the person they had pushed out the door. The elevator doors opened onto the executive floor with no welcome, no small talk, just urgency. Lillian, the chief executive's assistant, walked me straight to conference room Omega. Even from the hallway, I heard voices rising, overlapping, cracking under pressure. Inside, the long table was crowded with executives. Screens along the walls pulsed with red alert banners and error logs. A dozen people spoke at once until they saw me. Brian Keller sat at the far end of the table, shoulders tight, face washed out. He looked like he had not slept in days. He also did not look at me. Chief Executive Officer Marcus Rowe motioned to a chair near him. "Ms. Hartwell, thank you for coming on short notice." I took the seat. "You requested clarity. I can provide that." Rowe folded his hands. "Our operations are failing. Systems are locked. Clients are threatening legal action. We need to know how this happened. Then I will be direct." I said, "Your operational framework relies on undocumented tribal knowledge I created, maintained, and protected for years. I documented every process. I requested cross-training repeatedly. Leadership dismissed it." Brian finally spoke. Voice thin. "Bella, with respect. Your process notes were incomplete. Your attitude made collaboration difficult." I turned my head toward him. "My process notes were complete. Your team simply never read them." Rowe glanced sharply at Brian. "She left full documentation. It confirmed." Brian's jaw tightened. "She was always territorial with systems access." Lillian stepped forward, tablet in hand. "Sir, the digital audit is ready." Rowe nodded. "Show it." The screen changed. Every line of altered KPI data, every deleted evaluation note, every adjustment Brian had made to downplay my contributions flashed across the wall. The room went silent except for the soft hum of the projector. Rowe's voice dropped. "Brian." You falsified these reports. Brian stammered. I adjusted them for clarity. She was not a leadership fit. Rowe cut him off. Who rejected her promotion request? Brian hesitated. I did. The chief executive leaned back, studying him. Then he turned to me. Ms. Hartwell, he said, before we ask you to resolve anything, we need to know how you intend to proceed. I kept my hands folded on the table as every pair of eyes landed on me. The panic in the room had softened into something sharper, uncertainty mixed with expectation. They wanted me to save them. They just did not want to admit why they needed saving in the first place. I am not touching a single system, I said, until my role and the truth behind it are formally acknowledged. Chief Executive Officer Marcus Rowe nodded slowly. State what you need. I spoke clearly, without raising my voice. First, full authority to redesign operations. No half measures. No temporary fixes. One executive shifted in his seat. Another scribbled something in the margin of a notebook. Second, I continued, independent oversight of compliance. I will not report to Brian, nor will he touch any system I build. Brian's head snapped up. That is unnecessary. It is essential. I said, you altered evaluations and ignored critical procedures. Your involvement ends permanently. He went silent. Third, I said, fair compensation aligned with the responsibility level. And fourth, structural reform. We end single points of failure. Cross-training becomes mandatory. No exceptions. For a moment. No one spoke. The executives exchanged glances, tight whispers, raised brows, subtle nods. They had expected desperation. They had not expected terms. Rowe exhaled. Ms. Hartwell, this is a significant shift. It is the only shift that prevents this from happening again. Brian leaned forward, stiff. You cannot let her dictate. Rowe held up a hand. Brian, enough. Silence fell again, heavier this time. Finally, Rowe stood. Ms. Hartwell, step outside for a few minutes. We need to discuss your demands internally. The request was polite, but the tension underneath it was unmistakable. They were no longer negotiating with an employee. They were negotiating with the person holding the company's last lifeline. I rose from my chair, pushed it in neatly, and walked toward the door without looking back. Behind me, the room erupted into hurried whispers as the door clicked shut. Lillian opened the door and gestured for me to return. The room had changed. The panic was still there, but it was wrapped now in resignation, an understanding that the old structure was dead. Chief Executive Officer Marcus Rowe spoke first. Ms. Hartwell, we accept every term you presented. A murmur passed through the room. Soft, but unmistakable. Brian stiffened like someone bracing for impact. Rowe continued, There is one addition. We need you to temporarily supervise the emergency stabilization, only until the system is no longer in critical failure. He turned slightly. And Brian Keller is removed from operational command effective immediately. Brian's breath caught. You cannot be serious. Rowe cut him off. Your access has already been revoked. The argument died in his throat. I nodded. Then let us begin. They followed me to the operations wing, a room I once lived in more than my own home. Screens flickered with errors, queues jammed with failed requests, logs stacked with ignored warnings. Bella, Ethan said, rushing over. Thank God, we have been drowning. I am here to stabilize, not to rescue, I reminded him. Bring me every failure log from the last 7 days. As the team gathered around, I directed them through the steps they had never been taught. They listened now, not out of respect, but out of necessity. A younger analyst named Joel hovered near me, hesitant. Bella, there is something I should tell you. I looked up. Go on. He swallowed hard. Months ago, Brian told me to delete some of your process logs. He said they were outdated. I knew it felt wrong, but he was my supervisor. The words did not surprise me, but they settled heavily in my chest. Thank you for telling me. While reviewing the audit trails, I found more files Brian had tampered with, evaluations he had rewritten to make me appear disorganized, timestamps altered to hide his mistakes. Bella, Ethan said quietly, seeing the screen. He really tried to bury you. I breathed in slowly, steadying myself. Not anymore. The internal audit began before sunrise. By the time I walked into the executive conference room, the air felt brittle, like everyone inside had already heard things they wished they had not. Chief Executive Officer Marcus Rowe motioned for me to stand near him. Brian Keller sat across the table, shoulders curled inward, a man waiting for a verdict he still hoped would not come. The lead auditor adjusted her glasses. Mr. Keller, our review confirms multiple breaches. You altered key performance indicators, deleted operational logs, and falsified leadership metrics for Ms. Hartwell. Brian's voice cracked. Those numbers were misleading. I had to correct them. They were accurate, she replied. Your edits were not? Another auditor added. We also found instances where you changed timestamps to conceal noncompliance. Brian's jaw twitched. I made adjustments for clarity. Rowe's tone hardened. You manipulated evaluations to justify denying her promotion. He opened my folder, and slid it toward Brian. The red stamp glared from the first page. You humiliated a senior operations lead in front of staff? Then you buried her work to protect your position. Brian's composure broke. I was trying to maintain order. She was always difficult, too controlling. I spoke for the first time. I was filling gaps the company ignored. You built your authority on work you never understood. He finally looked at me, eyes frantic. Bella, please. You know how stressful it was. I made mistakes. I know, I said. I lived with the consequences of those mistakes for years. Rowe tapped the table once. Brian Keller, effective immediately. You are removed from all managerial responsibilities. Brian flinched. You are firing me. No, Rowe said. You will remain at Cargenta Dynamics in an associate role. You will report directly to Director Hartwell. The room fell silent. Brian's face drained of color. You cannot do that. I already have, Rowe replied. I did not smile. I simply opened a new performance file and placed it in front of me. Ready. My first morning as Director of Operational Integrity felt strangely quiet. No applause waited for me, no speeches, no sudden shift in the building's energy. The only difference was the badge in my hand and the weight of authority that finally matched the work I had been doing for years. Ethan met me outside my new office. Morning. Director Hartwell, he said with a half smile. Feels right saying it. Thank you. I replied. Let us get to work. Throughout the day, people stopped by not with emergencies, but with proposals, questions, ideas. For the first time, conversations revolved around improvement instead of survival. A project manager asked for cross-training support. A junior analyst wanted to learn the compliance logic I built. Even Sonia from IT came by, carrying a stack of notes. I want to document the rest of the system with you, she said. The right way? The right way. I had waited years to hear those words. By late afternoon, the hallways settled into a steady hum. No alarms, no urgent knocks, no panicked requests for fixes that only I could make. When the clock reached 5:30, I shut down my computer and stood up without guilt pressing on my shoulders. As I stepped into the hallway, Brian turned the corner. He froze when he saw me, eyes darting down. The badge clipped to his belt. Associate Operations Specialist looked painfully new. He murmured something I could not hear. I did not stop him. Instead, I returned to my office, signed the performance improvement plan waiting on my desk, and placed it in the outgoing tray for morning review. It was not revenge. It was simply order. I left the building feeling different, not triumphant, not vengeful, just grounded, solid, the way a foundation should feel. Brian once told me I lacked leadership potential, but leadership had never been the problem. I had been holding this company up for years. Now, at last, it was built to stand with me, not on me.